Hey everyone. Hi early people, you can take your put your cameras on. Thank you. Not early, you're right on time. Thanks. Well, welcome. We'll give it another minute or two as people arrive. I think we had 30 RSVPs, so if we can get 20 or so in the next 5 minutes, that'd be nice.
Oh, Felicity Jacobs coming. Fantastic.
Cool. Yeah. And Kira, you heard about Rob? Very sad news.
Yeah. Real shock.
Yeah. Look, he wasn't the healthiest man, I have to admit, but you don't expect that's for sure. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's sad. He was such a cool, he was a fantastic person, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I was reading the comments today. I've never seen so many comments on a post, to tell you the truth. It was incredible. Yeah. Hi, everyone. We're just going to wait another minute or so and we'll get started.
Wendy, would you mind sending Quinn the webinar link? Apparently she doesn't have it.
I just sent it to her.
Cool, thank you. Felicity, I know you're out there. I just want to say congratulations on having a child. And we got the loan done. Woo!
Good. We might get started. I'm sure anyone can pick it up as we go as well. So first of all, I just want to welcome everyone. Thanks for making the time to come along to this webinar. I am just going to sort of do a bit of an intro to today. And sorry, I'm just getting my notes together. So let me start by doing an acknowledgement of the country I'm on right now, which is the lands of the Wurundjeri. I want to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. My name's Mark Daniels. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Whitebox Enterprises. And I've had the joy of being a board member on Whitebox Finance, and Whitebox Finance developed a product about 18 months ago called the Social Enterprise Loan Fund. It's been really interesting to see how that's emerged over time. My job today is really to steer the conversation. We're going to have a panel discussion and a presentation just to kick things off. The purpose of today is really to talk about a few things. One's the Social Enterprise Loan Fund, and I think we'll probably all shorten it to the SELF, the SELF, as we go. And more broadly, it's the role of debt capital for jobs-focused social enterprises, and that's what the SELF has been created to do, provide access to debt capital. When I was thinking about this, I was thinking, gee, that's a series of words that you tend not to hear much in our world, access to debt for jobs-focused social enterprises. In the past, people have deemed debt, not relevant to their organisations simply because they couldn't access it, and that's changed now. And what we really want to talk about today is how that's changed, and we want to hear from two social enterprises that have accessed debt through the SELF and hear about their experience. And we want to open it up to questions from you as well. So if you're hearing things and questions are coming up for you, can you drop those questions in the chat, and we'll try and get to those questions when we're doing the conversational part and the Q&A part of this. So we're going to have three speakers today. One is Myrna O'Neill, who's the General Manager of the SELF. She's going to be the first speaker, and I'll present Myrna in a minute. We've got Kira Johnson, who's the CEO of Good Cycles, and we've got Imogen Thomas, who is the CEO and the founding board member of the Common Ground Project. So that's the context for what we're doing and what we're going to cover today. This is what the agenda will look like. So it's you're getting most of this now, but after Myrna speaks, we're going to meet the panel and go through some of the issues and challenges and discussion points around taking a loan on. So, yeah, it is. Sorry, Max. But we can also talk about that over the course of this as well, in terms of our aspirations for the self, which go beyond just jobs focused social enterprises potentially into the future. But yep, it's just jobs focused social enterprises at this stage. So I'm going to introduce Myrna, who's the GM of the Social Enterprise Loan Fund, or SELF. She's been with us at Whitebox Finance for, I don't know, 2.5 years, thereabouts. And she's got a deep finance background before that. Over to you, Myrna.
Right. Thanks, Mark. So the SELF, I'm just going to explain why the SELF was set up. And it was established by Whitebox actually at the beginning of the 2025 calendar year. So Mark said it was 18 months. It was more like, 14 months, I'd say. Our first loan, which was to SureTrack, who are based in New South Wales, is about to hit its first anniversary on the 30th of April. So that's pretty exciting. The fund was set up in response to the lack of fit for purpose capital available to social enterprises. So Whitebox incubates social enterprises and had experienced firsthand the struggles that those enterprises encountered when they were trying to access capital to grow their business. Apart from bootstrapping, which is often used by most social entrepreneurs to start up their business, businesses are typically limited to grant funding. As we all know, is supplier-led. So often the amount of capital you need is determined by what the grantor is offering, and it's on their timeline. So you need to apply, and if you are successful, it mightn't be exactly when you need to kick off. The second option is traditional funding, which comes from the major banks and some smaller banks. The advantage of this is it is demand led, but if it is accessible, which often it isn't because of collateral issues or lack of profitability, it's often unaffordable. So unsecured loans can go, well over 12-13%. So based on those issues, Whitebox decided that it would try and cater for that smaller market. So Whitebox generally focuses, as Mark said, on work integrated social enterprises or organizations that support employment pathways. And we have, I'm sorry, Max, you mentioned that you didn't realize this is just for work integrated social enterprises. We've had a couple of people apply that are hoping or in the process of developing their work integrated part of their business. And so even that means you can qualify to apply as long as you've got a very clear avenue to working towards that job creation or support employment pathway. So just to speed this up, the fund was designed to provide favourable terms as possible to the borrowers. So when we sat down trying to design this fund, we thought what would be optimal for a social enterprise. So we have negotiated fixed rates for the term of your loan. So they range from 6.5 to 9.5%, and loan terms go up to 7 years, which is really good relative to what's usually available. Having those extra years over the typical 3 to 4 years means that you've got smaller principal repayments over the life of the loan. So that's really helpful. We have fantastic investors. So we have people that have provided capital to us to enable us be an intermediary and lend it out to you guys, social enterprises, but we have to, we've made a commitment to repay that money to them. So therefore, it's really important that you can pay us back. And so that's our job. Myself, my colleague Quinn, who's online, we meet with social enterprises and try and establish just quite simply whether you as a social enterprise have considered how using loan proceeds that we provide will help you increase your impact through employment pathways or job creation, and what revenue sources are being generated and what costs have been incurred to generate that revenue, after what remaining free cash flow you will have to be able to pay us back. That's the way it works. And so far we have done 5 loans. Loan uses have ranged from buying property to working capital and to fit outs. And the cohorts that are being supported or jobs have been created for range from refugees to youth to Indigenous cohorts. So we're really quite flexible. Quinn and I would like to think that we're really open-minded in terms of the different models that are out there. So we encourage people to apply. We are patient, understanding people, I think. And if you do apply and we think you're not ready, we'll be really open about that. And we will say to you, look, this is what's needed for you to be successful in this process. Go back, look at your business model or your legal structure and come back to us when you're ready, and we're happy to go back to the IC. So just on that very quickly, the process is that we do our DD. Quinn and I go out and check those things that we discussed about what you're going to use the money for, how that's going to generate impact, how that's going to generate revenue. If we're comfortable that we are confident you can deliver on that, then we present to our IC, of which Mark is a member. There's 5 people. And if they approve that, then we move to litigation, or sorry, to the legal phase. And we prepare documents which are signed off, and then we give you the money. So I feel like I may be running over my lot of time, so I'll leave it at that. I hope that's a good summary of what we do and why we do it.
We haven't taken anyone to litigation, just to be really clear.
Sorry, that was the wrong word. The legal phase, yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to hear from Kira and Imogen. Just get them to introduce themselves. So if you both want to come off mute, and Kira, maybe if you can tell us a bit about Good Cycles and what you do.
Thanks, Mark, and hello, everybody. So Good Cycles, we are a job-focused social enterprise, and our focus is making employment opportunities for young people who have experienced barriers to employment. We do that through 4 business divisions. Our first and original is bike retail, and that's still going strong, but we have expanded over the years. So we also have a division that delivers e-bike based logistics. You can see a photo there of Andy on his way to a delivery. We also do food and organic waste collection and a couple of other things through that division. We have Good Spaces, which is large scale commercial gardening and landscape management. And then we have our Good People division, which is a labour hire offering, and our main partnership there is with Lime. We provide bike mechanics mostly to them. And young people are embedded across our divisions, and we provide wraparound support through our team of youth employment coaches. You're on mute, Mark.
Just to get a sense of the size of the organisation.
Yep, so we're running at about 10 million, maybe nudging a little bit north of that, and we've got 150-ish staff at the moment. And we've been going for about 12 years now.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Kira. Imogen, over to you.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Kira. Hi, everyone. My name is Imogen, and I'm a founding board member and the interim CEO of Common Ground Project. And shout out to Felicity, who has just returned from maternity leave and is in the audience today. Common Ground Project, we're a regenerative farm in Freshwater Creek, and we run training and employment pathways in hospitality for refugee and migrant women, and in farming for young people who have faced barriers to mainstream education opportunities. We are a team of 9 with a turnover of 1.2 million. And although we were established in 2019, we've only had DGR status and been a WISE since 2024. So fairly sort of fresh in this work, but also really passionate about it.
Amazing. Thank you. Can you just kind of outline the model around how you take someone from, unemployed and then move them through to, job ready at the end of that?
Is that for Kira or for me?
For you. Sorry, Imogen.
Oh gosh, where do we start? I guess the way that we operate is that we work with a really, really strong ecosystem of referral partners and pathway partners. So by referral partners, I mean organisations such as Cultura, who are working with people who have recently arrived in the Greater Geelong region and identifying opportunities for them that they'll find value from. And so we work really closely with them to identify participants who go through the hospitality program side of what we do. As for the farming and food systems, we work with partner organisations that are either academic institutions or community-based organisations in a similar way, and they refer people to us for either internships or student placements or work experience. Once they've completed those programs, we work with ongoing pathway partners to work out, somewhere along the journey, what sort of pathway do they want to work with, whether it's with us, ongoing work, or with someone else.
Amazing, thank you. So maybe, Wendy, we can drop the slide too and just move to smiling faces. So really what we want to unpack now is why you chose to go for a loan. So I'll start with you, Imogen. I mean, had you considered loans in the organisation? Had you had loans before? Where did the idea come from to explore a loan?
I think just in the spirit of transparency and real talk, we hadn't considered loans, but we were working off different sorts of debts. And for us, we needed to really take a look at how we were servicing those debts and what was a more strategic option for us. And so we figured that loan debt was actually not only going to be, more financially viable, it was also going to help us perform, for lack of a better word. So I think working with the team at the Self, it really helped us identify, okay, so what are we working with right now? What is the pathway to our next phase of growth? How are we going to scale? How are we going to work collaboratively with an organisation like Self to be able to increase our reporting, increase our due diligence, make sure that we're actually building our capacity around our cap stack.
Yeah.
So that's what led us to that. So it was, first of all, a practicality decision, but beyond that, it was also a capacity building decision.
Yeah, right. And just to explore that capacity building, I mean, what did it force you to make to think through things that you hadn't necessarily thought about or hadn't been given deep enough thought to previously?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for us, we're a functioning farm and we've got a hospitality grade kitchen, so we really wanted to look at how we treat those assets as business growth opportunities. So the farm, we sell produce at wholesale to restaurants. We also sell it direct to consumer through veggie boxes. But then the kitchen, apart from the many other things they do, food relief wise, they also are equipped to service a really strong catering and events business. So we knew that those were our next opportunities for growth and also to de-risk our reliance on philanthropic funding. But we knew that we also needed to be able to afford to resource it properly in order to be able to grow it. So, and I've completely forgotten the question, Mark. What was I saying?
No, it was around what did it force you to think about moving forward, I guess,
Yes.
in terms of strategy and thinking. Yeah.
I'm happy to jump in a minute after you, Imogen, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. I think for us, we, had the desire to grow those sides of the business, but we hadn't actually thought strategically about how we were going to grow them. We also knew that the catering and events business is really the best opportunity we have to create meaningful employment for the graduates of our programs.
Yeah.
So we just needed to work out what that looked like and what the plan was for that strategically and financially.
Yeah, brilliant. And Myrna, you wanted to follow up?
Yeah, I was just going to say that Felicity, who we've mentioned is on the call, had reached out originally before the fund was even set up, actually, and kind of explained that they were at a point where you wanted to grow and what avenues there were to kind of access capital. And we'd a couple of really good conversations around what would need to happen, kind of like what I was saying earlier about we wouldn't say no. We're saying, look, this is how a balance. But this is, this is the way a balance sheet should look if, you're going to try and be successful with a loan. And they went and took that on board and, kind of implemented a few things. So it was really just great that she reached out and got stuck in early. So, yeah, well done.
Thanks. And Imogen, just to follow up, I mean, why debt over grant, right? Because grant is the, and interesting to get your perception on grant and how grant and debt sit alongside each other.
It's a great question. I think we're all aware that the philanthropic landscape is shifting. And so for organisations like ours, it's really important that we're, that we're de-risking, basically. It's not it's not viable for us to rely solely on philanthropic funding, much the same as it's not viable for us to rely solely on our trading income either, because we know that both are exposed to certain risks, both are vulnerable in their own ways. And while they're fundamental and core to what we do, we didn't want to only rely on those avenues. But when I say that, specifically loan debt, it was just the right time for us as an organisation. But I will say that, following Myrna's point, at first we weren't ready. We really weren't ready. We didn't know how to be investment ready or, how to manage loan debt. So I think going through that journey of upskilling and learning how to be an organisation that can service that as an opportunity was a really important step for us. And now when we report on things like not just finances, but impact, we're a lot stronger and more detailed and diligent about that process. And that, the benefits of that are just exacted in so many other ways beyond the relationship with the self.
And do you think you could have accessed commercial finance or not?
No, I think at the time, just to be candid, at the time, we were going through a period of real financial instability. And, I know we're not alone in that, it's a sign of the times, but also we were established as a functioning cafe, which was a wonderful part of what we did and our greatest revenue source, but also a huge money sink for us. So, and apart from the dollars that go into that, also the time and energy and oxygen that was being taken away from our impact, from our programmatic outputs, that kind of thing. We had to have a really, Flick, I'll never forget December 2024 when we were really, at that crunchy point of making the decision. But, we had to recognize that as much as we loved the fact that a cafe could bring in that kind of revenue, if we were going to be able to achieve the impact goals that we had in mind, we really had to focus our efforts. And so the closure of the cafe, as a result of that, we entered into a period of real volatility, which meant that we wouldn't have fit into any conventional or traditional capital application of any sort. So we had to really think outside the square.
Thanks, Imogen. That's just a great picture of where you're at. I'm going to go to Kira now. Kira, yeah, I love that we've got two ends of the spectrum too. We've got $1 million business and a $10 million business. So no, it's a longer spectrum than that, but the differences and similarities are really striking at times as well. When did debt come up for you guys? And have you had debt before? What was the attitude towards debt?
Yeah, so look, it's interesting the way you introduced that. Like, there's so many similarities actually in where we were at and the type of thinking that we were starting to enter into at the point that we had the conversation about the self-loan. So we were at a point where we'd grown very quickly. We had some inefficiencies in the business, funding cliff at the same time, but also a really strong evaluated impact model and some really good commercial opportunities. So it was really about what we needed to get into the business that would enable us to grow, but also strengthen us. And I think that's where we started to look at ourselves through the lens of any business needs investment in order to be able to grow. We want to demonstrate ultimately that through social enterprise that we can be a business that can be sustainable and deliver social enterprise. So how should we be thinking about ourselves and our financing needs, and taking a step into loan finance through self seemed like a logical place to start. And it didn't end up being just loan. There was same with Imogen, there was a stack that involved grant funding as well. I think that it was really an important piece in us developing our commercial strength, I think, and it was the right step. Retrospectively, even more so than we'd even considered actually at the beginning of the journey, to be honest.
Yeah. And so for you alone, you've had a lot of grants over the years. Grants have become harder to access, and I think that became clear as well. But I think what I'm hearing from you is that commercial discipline of a loan was actually something that you weren't averse to. The idea of actually having repayable money and debt was does bring a sharper lens sometimes to your thinking.
Absolutely, and reflecting on the way that grant funding has operated in the business, the relationship between grant funding and commercial acuity and delivering the impact, you know, it was a little bit messy, right? So we'd started to think really clearly, there's three types of things that we need finance in the business for. One is to pay for our impact, one is for growth, one is for innovation, research and development. We were really clear that the impact and the growth pieces were the most important. We know there's a longer game to play with the funding for impact with potential future PBOs, etc. But we need to get the cash into the business, A, to help us stabilize, but also to help us to take advantage of the growth opportunities that we've got. And there's no shame in saying we need funds to be able to do that, because every business needs that.
Yeah.
And so there's a kind of a level of confidence for us to go into this process with that in mind. Now, at the time, because of our situation, the bank wouldn't even consider us for an overdraft, right? Let alone anything else. We could maybe get little bits and pieces of like equipment finance, but not at the scale that was required for the sort of growth that we were looking at. One of our existing contracts doubling in the next 3 to 4 months, a really strong pipeline in our so that was our organic waste collection contract, and then a really strong pipeline in our spaces division where there's a huge industry and we only need a little chunk of that and we're doing really well.
Yeah.
We don't want those opportunities to slip through our fingers because we can't get the right investment.
Yeah, and that's what it's always been about for me is, you know, philanthropy is a lottery at the end of the day. If you're lucky enough to have DGR status, philanthropy is a lottery at the end of the day. You know, there's a winner or a couple of winners, and there's a lot of losers in a philanthropic grant process, generally speaking. And that's not good enough when you're running a business. You've got to have access to finance when you actually need that finance. And I think your growth example is a really interesting example. And even with your example, Imogen, it's similar. It was, how do we take the next step as an organisation? And when we assess it, we're looking differently to the way a bank would look, but fundamentally the same. We're saying, can these organisations actually repay the money over time? Do we believe that they're going to have that capacity to repay the money over time? That's the fundamental question. And Myrna I don't want to paraphrase this, Myrna, because you will say it better than I will. And as an investment committee, what we're saying is, how believable is the case here, right? This organisation's lost money for the last 4 years. Why do we believe it's going to be able to repay this loan? And so there's a whole narrative that has to go with this, that probably a bank would never even contemplate this narrative, because there's no security on either of your loans. There is some kind of security, isn't there, Myrna, just to touch on that?
Yeah, well, so there's general security arrangements where, you know, and this is something that a lot of people may not be familiar with, but are actually very common, where if you have no collateral, you enter into a security arrangement along with your loan that just says you're giving access to future property that's acquired in the future. And the reason that's really attractive for a lender is that if you are really successful, which we believe you're going to be, or we wouldn't give you the loan, it means that then we've got a stake in the ground. And if it does ever get to a point where, God forbid, you need to like go into receivership, then at least we have rights to try and access something and reclaim some of the debt. It just means that someone else doesn't come in and go, oh, like butt us out of the way, because we're really small. We operate in a really small space. And, you know, for example, ASA, before the self was even set up, Whitebox Enterprises provided a loan to them. And since then, they've absolutely, you know, Mark would know more than me, but they've done really quite well and have access to their financing, I think. And then suddenly you're dwarfed. So to cut a long answer short, yeah, general security arrangements, but no actual physical assets currently when we provide the financing. Yeah.
Yeah, good. I'm just going to move on to the application process, and I might stay with you, Kira. But what was the application process like for you? What did it involve?
There was a lot. There was a period there where Myrna and I really got to know each other really well, which, you know, which was great. I think that I would like to second the words that you used, Myrna, earlier. I know patient was one of them, patient and kind. I think through all of that, it was detailed, you know, that there was a lot there, but I really felt like Myrna was on our side. It wasn't that we weren't trying to prove ourselves. It's that let's go through a process, and they were on our side. They did go through everything with a fine-tooth comb. They went through all our contracts. They went through our finances. and remodeled it in a way that helped them and us to look at it from all sorts of different perspectives, which I found really useful. And actually, again, that process, things like going through the contracts like that, has given us insights, and that's meant that we are lifting our practice, because this is how we can strengthen our understanding of our own commerciality. Like, are we negotiating our contracts well enough so that they can stand up to a process like this, for example? There was a lot in there, and it did require time, and I was really grateful to have the support of my board and our finance support. But there was more to it that we got out of it than just the loan. It strengthened us. And I really felt like Myrna was on our side, which was great, because, you know, it's a little bit of unknown territory, right?
And your transparency, Ciara, was like fundamental to you being successful in the process. So, you know, we can talk about that again, but there's a big turn off when you're going through that process is someone being like, no, I'm not going to give you that information. I mean, there's a certain amount that's totally commercially viable where you go, I don't want to give you the name of such and such because whatever. But ultimately, the more open you can be, the more helpful it is for that outcome, you know? So the more we understand. And again, just to keep that in mind, we are always, I would love to say, on your side, always. So just keep that in mind.
I think so. And I think also, if I to add another piece of that, we had a really strong belief in what we felt like we were going to be able to achieve. And being able to articulate that clearly to Myrna through the process was really supported in the way that Myrna took us through the process.
Yeah, no, that's really good. And I guess just to give people a sense of time, I mean, how many months did it take? And on, you know, like, was it, you know, 3 or 4 weeks of work all up, you know, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, we had been speaking for a little while. I mean, I think I'd second what Imogen said about when we had the very initial conversations, we weren't ready. So that there'd been a little bit of back and forth over a few months. And then I'm going to say there was probably a much more intense, maybe 6 to 8 weeks, where we were really gathering and framing. And that did sit alongside conversations with other funders, etc., because we ended up with a stack that worked really well for us. So there was an intense period, and then it all kind of fell into place all at the same time. Yeah. And so I think, again, what I want to emphasize with that is, yes, it took time, and you need to be prepared for that. But what you get out of it is actually greater than the sum of what you put in the end, because I still carry through my learnings from that through to a lot of what I need to do day to day to manage the organisation strategically and operationally. Yeah. So it was a great professional development experience for me as well, actually.
Yeah, nice. Thanks. That's great. And I'm going to go to Imogen now. I mean, you know, it's never exactly the same for 2 organisations. What was it like for you going through the application process?
I think for someone like me who's quite used to a more formulaic approach when it comes to making a business case for funding or resources or support, you know, whether it's through a philanthropic funder or a, you know, sort of more traditional bank loan. I think for me at first, it was a very hands-on process, and, you know, it was handed over from Felicity to myself. So I was kind of catching up with what had been covered already, what hadn't been covered yet. And I think what stood out to me is that because I was so accustomed to a very like one-size-fits-all template approach, you know, this is the information you need to be able to provide to build your case. What struck me was the fact that this wasn't a paint-by-numbers approach, that this was very much Myrna and Quinn working responsively with where we were at and devising questions or inquiries around where we were at, which was a totally new process for me. And I think at first, you know, for me, I was trying to understand, okay, well, what's the full gamut of information we're required to provide? You know, I was looking for that very binary way of bringing Myrna and Quinn across the organisation. And I realised that actually the reframe that was available was, oh no, this is actually a far more responsive way of doing this due diligence. And when I realised that, it was actually a real it was a real treat and privilege to be able to say, okay, this is how I can start to learn how to exercise and strengthen my critical thinking around, okay, what are we looking for? Or in fact, oh, Myrna, I don't think that's actually going to be relevant for you. Like, how about this? And so being able to bounce with each other in that way was, yeah, like to echo Kira, a really great professional development opportunity for me. And I think, you know, there were times where, because we, Flick, I'm not sure when you made the first initial inquiry, but, Flick went on mat leave in May last year, and we locked in on 31st of December. And so, that was a long process of really like getting to know the team intimately and vice versa. And so I think there were times where I was like, is this how it's going to be, in perpetuity? Is this how the entire lifespan of the loan is going to be? Are we going to be like on speed dial? Like, am I going to be calling Myrna when she's, serving drinks at her kids' school fete? Like, is this where? But in fact, what was a sort of surprise was that, once we locked in, it's actually been super quiet. And, I'm sort of feeling a little bit like separation anxiety with Myrna.
Same.
But there has been that real flow of, like, yep, as expected, these are the reporting timelines and requirements. And so now we've embedded different processes reporting wise for our, our board and our operational level that feel really, well, I wouldn't go back to the word formulaic, but they certainly feel like a very healthy routine for us that we didn't have before.
And what's the role of the board? Like, how did they go on the journey? And how critical was board management in the whole process?
Definitely. So we've got an absolute gun of a treasurer who is worth her weight in gold, and she was very hands-on in the process, very enabling, but also very, one of her super strengths is that her capacity to do the due dilly is like, second to none. And so she was very close to the whole process and, got to know Myrna and Quinn pretty well. And, she was, in the healthiest way possible, very much, questioning sort of or interrogating, like, is this the right fit for us? Are we ready for this? What's our plan? This is how I see it, but also, what does Myrna recommend, in terms of how we manage this? So very involved, and we have the rest of our board. We're really happy for her to take the lead on that. And it really helped me as well, because, I've only got so much capacity to be able to make those inquiries. So having her as a sounding board was a really helpful process for me personally.
Yeah. I mean, you've got to have that deep. It is a big decision and it's a risk, and having that expertise on your own side. We would also say to people, feel free to get a lawyer to read all the documents, because when we send the loan agreement, it's probably the most intimidating document you've ever seen. Unfortunately, we love Minter Ellison, but you can't make a loan doc seem, you can't turn it into a 101 doc, unfortunately. So you do need to understand what you're getting into. I mean, just as you do when you take a home loan on, there is a whole lot to it. We're just move on to what happened. I'll stay with you, Imogen. Like, how many months ago did the loan come through? Around New Year?
Yep, literally.
Yeah. So you're 4 or 5 months in. What has it enabled you to do, and what changed? And you've alluded to some of the change, but what's happened with an injection of capital into the business?
So the most impactful thing is that it enabled us to be able to staff up our catering and events business in a way that we weren't able to commit to before that. So in our region, we've had like a really healthy pipeline of demand for our services as a catering and events provider. And so that was really exciting and really promising, but we also knew that, this is a chicken or egg situation. Do we bring on the staff in a permanent capacity to be able to service this demand, or do we generate a bit of demand with casual staffing and then, sort of grow it to the point where we can do that? So since then, we now have a team of 2 permanent staff who are driving the catering and events business. And they were immediately able to unlock a lot of that demand, from weddings to corporate catering to, weekend retreats, that kind of thing. There's not much they can't do. And they're, we just had the right people at the right time to take on those roles. So that's really exciting. And since then, not only have they been able to generate a really healthy amount of revenue that's gone towards our training income, but they've also, through that work been able to create casual employment opportunities immediately for the graduates of our Staying Grounded program, which is the hospitality program we run for refugee and migrant women. So the financial and the impact gains have been immediately shifted for us. Of course, it's still early days. We're only 4 months in, but it's been such a good news story for us to be able to just, have to have rubber hit the road, basically.
Yeah, so it sort of gave you that it's an injection at the end of the day, this ability to accelerate things that would not have happened otherwise. Fundamentally, it's super great to hear. And you've also said it's sort of tying up some of the board processes and the way that you sort of in terms of reporting on impact and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Kira, you've had cash for a bit longer at Good Cycles, and I know you've had I think, what was it, around October last year that we sort of finalised that. So you're 6 or 7 months into the process. What would you say has happened as a result of the finance?
Yeah, I mean, the whole stack that we were able to put together for last year, including the self-loan, it enabled us to continue essentially. So we've been able to take on the expansion of the contract. We've been able to take on the work that was in the pipeline for our spaces division. It was working capital essentially was what we had through a $250,000 loan from Self. So it's enabled us to continue and realise the opportunities that we've had. And actually the growth then is proving to be even greater than we thought it was going to be. And if we hadn't had that stabilizing effect of that injection of cash, we wouldn't have been able to do that. We wouldn't have been able to reap the rewards of like the restructure that we've been through last year, for example. So we've grown, we've implemented a slightly new model of our youth employment program, which means that we're working with more young people in more spaces in a clearer way. So there's 6 young people who we've been able to give jobs to that we wouldn't have been able to do if we hadn't have had that support, which is, that's the immediate effect of here's an opportunity commercially, the pieces of the puzzle that need to be in place in order to have the outcomes that we want of the commerciality and the impact have been able to realise at the same time, which is, that's the sweet spot. Yeah. We recognise now where we're at now, drawing on the learning, as I have emphasised, that we've had through that process, means that now I've got a view to the further opportunities that we've got for growth. I know how to go about structuring us so we can take advantage of that. And one of the most exciting things is that the bank has been able to see that the money and coming through the business, the cash, our cash position is much better and much stronger. The revenue's coming through. And they've started to say, we might be prepared to lend you some money at a higher interest rate that we can't necessarily afford at this point. But actually, that was one of the most exciting things that happened to us we would consider lending you money now, which is actually it's a litmus test, right, to how well a business is going. Yeah. So we were excited about that and excited to be able to look at modelling for the next stage.
And I will go to the next stage. I mean, what are you thinking of accessing capital again moving forward?
Yes, absolutely. So now we're really clear that we need some more working capital and we need equipment finance. So we've stretched our fleet of front deck mowers and utes to its edges, and now we're actually having another conversation with Myrna about equipment finance, which is really exciting. But also looking at moving forward, what is the mix of finance that we need? There's still some grant opportunities that are out there, but we can be really intentional because we have a better understanding of what pieces fit together and what way to give us what we need in order to, as I said, grow and match the commercial and the impact at the same time. So how do we fund impact as we grow? How do we get the working capital and the equipment that needs to be in place to take advantage of the opportunities?
It's really interesting and very different conversation to what you would have been having 2 years ago about how to grow as an organisation and just that concept of a capital stack. I mean, I guess just for anyone who doesn't understand, it's about having a mixture of different types of capital together to address an issue. And I know, Kira, for you guys, the money from the self actually liberated a whole lot of other money as a result of that process, and vice versa. You know, having some commitments from other funders enabled us to come on board as well. So, you know, it's kind of an interesting concept of using different forms of capital to create what you need at the time, the right mix.
That's right. And I probably add to that in saying that, in my view, there's kind of two parts to that. One is the faith in the due diligence that other funders know would have had to have occurred for us to be, you know, being approved for a self loan. But I think that there's also some strength in how we see ourselves, again, commercially. If we can provide forecasts for the next 1, 2, 3 financial years that include loans and loan repayments alongside our growth and our impact, I think it sends a message about our longer term stability, which sends a message about the value of investing with us, whether it's through a grant or through a loan.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And Imogen, on reflection, is there anything you would have changed about the process? You know, is there like, are there any deep reflections about what you went through, and, you know, whether I'd do it again, or whether I'd, you know, if I did, I'd be better prepared next time because of whatever, or what?
To be honest, there isn't, I can't really think of anything I would do differently. I think for me, on a personal level, it was great to go through the reframe I had around the type of information being collected or required to build the case for Common Ground project. But I mean, if I were to, you know, sort of make a recommendation to, you know, past me, I would just say, just lean in, like, trust the process, and treat it as a great upskilling opportunity, not just for the organisation, but for yourself as well. But no, I wouldn't change anything. Love your work.
Nice. That's great. I want to open it up to any questions from anyone in the audience. I know we've lost a couple of people in the last few minutes as people need to move on to next meetings. But if you've got a question or a comment or a reflection, just put your hand up and I'll take you off mute, or take yourself off mute.
Well, while we're waiting, I just like to make one point, just on the extent of the relationship once the loan's been deployed. So as the guys were saying, you know, it is a very reasonably intense DD process, and that's just for us to get the faith that you have the capacity or the culture to be able to take on this loan. And then after that, we only need to catch up once a year. You know, and we do ask for one, you know, either online or in-person meeting, and then just some ongoing financial reporting, just so we can collectively, you know, discuss how you're progressing. But so it's still, it's not a complete, you know, bottom drawer type of arrangement, but it is a lot less intensive going forward.
Yeah, great. Okay, I think we've covered a lot, actually, and I can understand why you might not have questions, because you know, we've been pretty comprehensive and we wanted to be in terms of what we covered today. But if you do, just put your hand up now and I'm really happy to take any questions. If we're not seeing that, I really just want to take a minute to thank Imogen and Kira in particular for making your time available today and doing a bit of prep for this with us as well, because, you know, it's been such a stunning experience for me. You know, I've never been a banker in my entire life, so sitting on the other side in the investment committee has been the most fascinating experience. And so thanks to Imogen and Kira, and thanks to Myrna and Wendy as well. I really appreciate the work you did in pulling this together. Thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it. Those comments are great. The next step, if you're interested, is to reach out through our website. We have a, what's it called, Myrna? An expression of interest.
EOI, yeah.
In the EOI process. It wouldn't hurt if you want to contact Myrna directly either, but we kind of like to capture the EOIs, and Myrna is Myrna at whiteboxenterprises.com.au. We'd love to talk to anyone, and Tim's got a question. Amazing. I'll come to you in a sec. We'd love to talk to anyone. We really want to have those early conversations, because we can direct you at that point, and we can save you a lot of time. You know, there's no point in going right down this alley, and we won't do it with you if we don't think that you're well suited to what's on the table. So, you know, you'll get a lot more attention from us than you would from other commercial lenders. Tim, over to you.
You can take him off mute, Mandy.
No, he was off mute.
Was he?
There we go. I couldn't unmute myself, but then once I did need to then unmute myself once I was able to. Sorry for that. Yeah, thanks for the session. And Mark, you just kind of mentioned then attention, I think was the word you used. I'd just be interested, obviously, Imogen and Kira, you talked about the experience, like it was a learning experience for you and sort of made you think about things different, about how your social enterprises function a bit differently because you were having to go through this process. But I just wonder, Mark, Myrna, others, if would you sort of characterize it as that you're providing additional sort of assistance or kind of coaching, or I don't know what the right word is, but sort of, you know, there's going through the process because you need to do the work to get to a place where you can say, yes, we're on the same page about how the loan is going to be used and repaid, etc. Imogen, you talked a little bit about it being feeling more like a partnership than a sort of more adversarial kind of arrangement, which doesn't surprise me given the people here and the organisations they work for. But I just wonder, you know, is there clearly something different about this type of loan than there would be other commercial loans, or even impact investing has a different slant on it. But yeah, I just wonder if there's any reflections. Maybe it's from Whitebox initially on. Would you characterize it as being part of the process, or is it almost, you know, the other thing that comes to mind is like a private equity. When they invest in a business, they often seek to transform that business. They drop someone in to try and do that kind of thing, which is I just wonder about kind of where you fit on that scale, you think.
I'm going to throw to Myrna because she's just been in finance for 15 or 20 years, so she can talk to the difference, I guess. So over to you, Myrna.
Yeah, I would say it's probably got more of an equity feel to it. It's a good comparison. The partnership, the reason like private equity are so involved is that they benefit from, you know, the complete exponential growth in the capital value of the business. Whereas we're involved because we love the impact. For us is the equivalent for the private equity people. So yeah, I'd say it's more of a partnership. And Whitebox Finance that I work for is just a part of Whitebox Enterprises, but it's got really broad diverse skill set and networks. So if there's any opportunity to link anyone up to any of that, you know, we're very willing to do it, because ultimately it comes back to the broader job effect, which is we just, you know, the reason we get up and work for this business is that we want to give people the opportunity to work that don't get that opportunity. So I suppose the short answer is yes, it's more than a transactional relationship. It's more like a partnership. And if there's any help we can give you, we will do our best to do that. Yeah.
Imogen, Kira?
I think from my perspective, something that I really liked was that Myrna was really candid from the start about, I guess, the startup energy of the Self as well. And so I felt like there weren't the same constraints that you might face in more traditional conversations about investment or loans and so on. And so for me, there was a real sense of Myrna meeting us where we were at, and really leaning into the newness and in fact the capacity to really pave the way or to create a bit of a blueprint through that process. Yeah, so that I think that's a big part of why it felt so much more like a partnership than a you know, me inquiring or, you know, requesting in a more sort of top-down way. Yeah,
I mean, I think you know, big picture, this is a trial, right? So the Self is a way to determine the appetite of the market and the market's ability to respond when you put a product out there like the Self, right? Will people take it up? Will they pay their money back? Will our investors get their money back ultimately at the rate that was expected? You know, does it lead to the sorts of changes that Kira and Imogen are already suggesting are starting to happen in their organisation, right? Like, is money a big blockage for social enterprises in terms of achieving their broader objectives? And if the money were there, would those broader objectives, you know, what has been the opportunity cost of not having a fund like this for the last 30 years when money has just not been there, when people have needed it quite often? How many have gone under? How many have not grown to the extent that they could have? How many contracts have been lost because someone didn't have enough working capital to cover the costs that were due in there? So I guess our experiment here is to, and we're being evaluated by Melbourne Business School. So in 2029, we'll be in a point where we can actually say, hey, look at all the impact that you can generate from a $4.4 million fund. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could scale this up and social enterprises really tuned into this space? But you know, there's an element of market making, hence a webinar, right? Like, we've still got to, there's a traditional mindset in a whole lot of social enterprises and not-for-profits that borrowing is not a particularly attractive thing to do, and it's risky. And you know, we part of our work is to make people understand that sure, there's risk, but there's massive returns if you can, you know, if you're ready for that opportunity as well. So Tim, I guess what your question was wide-ranging, and our answer was wide-ranging, but we didn't set this up to be a capacity building program. We set this up to be provide the finance at the right time. But I think what we've also learned is organisations sometimes need help to get to that point, and we've got to provide that help, or we're not going to get their loans out the door. End of story. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. All right, amazing. It's 12:57. This is exactly when Wendy's timesheet said that we were going to wrap up today. So thank you so much. I've already thanked everyone. Thanks for hanging on, and all your attention. And please reach out to us if you've got any more questions or interest in, you know, talking about finance. See you guys.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.